How do you know that you're logging the right data as you set up your security tools? How do you know that the right alerts have been set up for you to detect a breach? Or that all of the vulnerabilities you've been told to fix can actually be exploited by attackers, and that you're not wasting your time pursuing a bunch of false positives? This has been my challenge as a security practitioner, from my time as a CIO to my time at Splunk, where I didn't really understand that my security posture until I was breached or until I was reacting to a breach. And so my philosophy and thesis changed to, how do I look at my environment through the eyes of the attacker and use that attacker's perspective to identify my blind spots, identify my ineffective security controls, and make sure I'm fixing problems that truly matter. And the reason why that's important is the hardest part of the job as a security practitioner is deciding what not to do. Because as you go through this process of assessing your risks, prioritizing your fix actions, going through the remediation, and reporting up to leadership, the reality is during that assessment process, you've got vulnerability scanners like Nessus or Qualys, you're using exploitation tools like Inside VM and so on. And these are all tools that I personally used within my organization. When I would use these various assessment tools, my vulnerability scanners were very noisy, and being vulnerable doesn't mean I'm actually exploitable. I might have a vulnerability, but it may require some obtuse conditions in order for an exploit to be possible. And so I had to sift through these 100,000 vulnerabilities to find the 5 or 10 that were true threats. I would go off and hire external consultants to join my organization and run a manual pen test. And for time and money, they would assess a very small portion of my environment. And they'd give me a PDF, and their intent was to make us look bad, to poke us in the eye, show us our problems, and then they'd leave. And so what I'd get is this incomplete snapshot with my team scrambling to try to figure out what to fix, how to fix it. And then upon fixing it, having no easy way to verify that the issue's truly been remediated. We then often started using security risk management tools in order to do more effective reporting. And the problem there is it was garbage in and garbage out. And then finally, we started using breach attack simulation tools. And my frustration with those tools is I had to install yet more credentialed agents across my organization. And I had to write these fake attack scripts that were almost immediately outdated once my environment changed. And so the burden or the challenge within this assessment space is our inability to effectively prioritize our fix actions and our threats. And from there, when we went off to remediate things, very little of those remediations could actually be automated, either because the automations had to be written custom to my environment, or the changes were in parts of the environment that were too sensitive or too high risk for automated fix actions. And we only trusted a human subject matter expert to go off and fix it. And then finally, when we do the reporting, it was once again garbage in, garbage out. And it was very difficult for us to clearly articulate our security posture, not only today, but how that posture has improved over time. And so it's from this experience that we shifted our philosophy to understanding our environment through the eyes of the attacker. And here's a concrete example of why that's important. Attackers don't have to hack in using 0 days like you see in the movies. They can just log in with valid credentials that they found from elsewhere. So in this attack example, an attacker is going to be able to find employee names for your organization through LinkedIn. They're going to use a mix of techniques like credentialed spraying, credentialed stuffing, brute forcing, to gain access to your externally exposed services, whether it's in Git or Confluence or Jenkins. And once they gain access as a valid user, they're going to be able to pilfer additional information, additional domain user information, domain admin credentials, and so on. And including things like getting access to your cloud tokens and secrets. And from there, they're able to traverse the network, continue to do reconnaissance, continue to pilfer and iterate until they're able to gain admin access. For example, if you've got a VMware environment, oftentimes administrators will keep the passwords for virtual machines in the notes section of the VM. Or if you don't encrypt the VMware backups, there's a straightforward way to extract the admin credentials directly from the binary MTD files. or if you have misconfigurations and you allow LLM&R poisoning, or you have clear text protocols. The point is there are a number of ways that an attacker is going to be able to maneuver, elevate their privileges, and own your environment. And in this attack path, not a single CVE or piece of malware was required. Attackers just have to log in, and they're able to take advantage of chaining together credentials that they've harvested with misconfigurations in your environment, with dangerous defaults in your products. And the challenge is, how quickly can you detect this? And how do you actually know? This was the struggle. So our vision at Horizon 3 is to help you proactively find and fix your attack vectors before criminals exploit them. And this is important. Traditionally, the bulk of my cybersecurity spend when I was a practitioner was on the reactive side. It only kicked in, my logging tools, monitoring, alerting, and so on, only kicked in once the attacker gained initial access. And by then it's too late. What I want to be able to do is shift left so I can continuously understand my attack surface. And we do that through continuous automated pen testing with our product called NodeZero. And with this continuous automated pen testing, you can find exploitable attack vectors. You can fix by prioritizing the remediations based on the impact or threat to the business. You can then verify those fixes and that your security controls are actually effective. And now you've got an accurate, real-time ability to report your posture to the leadership, to the board, and to regulators. And from our past experience with previous products, our design goals were to deliver NodeZero as a true, pure SaaS offering. So there are no persistent or credentialed agents that you've got to install and maintain. There are no custom scripts, and there's no cheating. We don't want you to give us credentials. We want to run with the lowest possible privileges and prove that we can escalate from a local user to a domain user to a domain administrator, for example. The second key design goal was we wanted to be up and running in less than 10 minutes. So in 3 clicks, you should be able to run a full scope pen test of your internal environment and soon your external environment using a self-service user interface or an API. In fact, many of our customers wire these automated pen tests into their DevOps process. So as they provision or create your Terraform environment or other cloud automation, at the end of that provisioning, you can trigger a pen test to make sure that you haven't introduced any new attack paths. And then finally, we wanted to do this without requiring any consultants or professional services. So how do we do that? I'm going to jump over into the product and show you how to run a pen test in a few clicks. So you can go to portal.horizon3.ai.com. You can log in with your Google ID or your LinkedIn ID and start a free trial in just a couple of minutes. Once you're in here, you want to run a pen test. So you're going to click Run a Pen Test. You can customize it. And for simplicity, just accept all the defaults. You don't have to do anything else. What we're now generating is essentially a malicious link. And when you execute that malicious link, it is no different than an attacker using my laptop right now to gain initial access. That means somebody has clicked on a bad link or a bad attachment on this laptop, or from this laptop is where an insider threat is going to attack. And it doesn't have to be a laptop. It's anywhere where you've got a Docker host running Linux. So it could be a server inside your network. It could be a laptop on your guest Wi-Fi. And what it's going to do is act as an attacker from that machine and then find ways to gain access to disrupt your systems and to show ways that your data could be stolen. So accept all the defaults. You can copy this malicious link to the clipboard. And then anywhere where you've got a Docker host running Linux, you're going to copy, paste, and execute. That's it. So what I just did is I just gave NodeZero initial access to the network. And by doing that, what NodeZero is going to do is enter this maneuver loop just as an attacker would. It is going to start to enumerate and conduct reconnaissance on the network. It's going to find credentials that it can harvest. It's going to exploit vulnerabilities that it detects as it fingerprints every host, port, service, running piece of software, and so on. It is going to find ways to exploit dangerous product defaults and misconfigurations, and it's going to execute this maneuver loop. Now, as it does that, what NodeZero is doing under the covers is generating a cyber terrain map that represents the environment that I'm in. So all of the hosts, ports, services, credentials, pieces of data, and so on are all represented as this knowledge graph. And from those knowledge graphs, we're able to run a variety of path analysis techniques that say, to steal this data, we found 3 different paths to get there. And if you fix this one problem right here, you can shut down 2 out of 3 vectors and maximize your return on effort. The core innovation in technology is this knowledge graph and the analytics we're able to do on top of it as we conduct that automated pen test. Finally, the way that we operate, NodeZero acts as an APT, an advanced persistent threat. It is using the same techniques and tactics as those APTs. It is orchestrating hundreds of offensive tools that you're going to see, some custom built by Horizon 3. Most are the same tools that standard ransomware packages and other threat actors are going to make use of. We designed the product to be safe to run in production. And so we know what exploits are safe to execute, which are dangerous to execute. We know how to throttle our activity so we don't overload DNS, we don't overload your domain controllers, so that you can safely assess your environment in production to understand all of your threats. The key output is the path, the various attack paths we're able to identify, proof of exploitation, and proof of impact. And once again, we do all of this with no credentialed agents and no persistent agents that you've got to install and maintain. So now what I'll show you is how we manifest these attack paths in the product. So within the product, what you want to do is look at, within the operations tab, all of the ops that are running. And when you come in for the free trial, you're going to see this sample operation right here. And when you click on that sample operation and just go straight to impacts, in cybersecurity, there are 2 types of problems. Problems where you've got to skip lunch and cancel plans with your family, and everything else. Because once again, the hardest part of the job is deciding what not to do. If there are any critical impacts that NodeZero identified, you are going to have a rough day. You have to skip lunch, you've got to cancel plans with your families, because the problems that are identified as critical impacts are a really big deal. And then there's everything else. So for example, NodeZero is able to find a way to compromise the domain, which means NodeZero got keys to the kingdom and had complete unadulterated access to every aspect of your environment, all your hosts, ports, data, credentials, and so on. And if you look, it found 6 different attack paths that led to that domain compromise. So the way to read this is there were 6 different paths, exploiting a net logon vulnerability, finding a way to elevate privileges to domain administrator, SMB code execution issues. These are 6 different paths that led to the outcome of domain compromise. So let's just pick this one. This looks pretty interesting. So what you see is NodeZero, from its point where you initiated it, did 2 things in parallel. The first thing it did was execute a module called Responder, which is a very common attacker tool that is looking for man-in-the-middle type vulnerabilities in your DNS configurations. And what it's able to do is collect hashes on the wire by spoofing and pretending that it is an actual service within the network. And so in this example, we turned on Responder, and here is proof of us collecting a username within the smoke domain, AJ Smith, and here is the encrypted hash that represents AJ Smith's password. So here is proof of us turning on Responder and proving that there is an LLM&R misconfiguration in the environment. The next thing that we did, or that NodeZero did, was it took that credential and it tried to crack the hash. So here is proof of us taking that hash, the encrypted hash that we found, and running it against a hash cracking rig automatically to crack that credential and get it in clear text. And what this means is you've got weaker default credentials as a policy in the environment. And now we've got the full credentialed pair. Now, separately, what NodeZero did was it found the domain service, it found the domain controller, it found that SMB was configured to allow for access, and it was able to take that credentialed pair, query SMB, and verify that the credentials were legitimate. And here is proof of us using or being able to log in with the AJ Smith credential, with the password that we're able to crack into that SMB service. And here is us proving that we were able to gain administrative access on that domain controller. So what you have is the path, you've got all of the proof, and you've got the impact of domain administrator. And here are the two very specific things you've got to fix. You have a weaker default credentialed problem because we were able to easily crack that password. And so you need to increase your password complexity. And then separately, you've got a misconfiguration in your within your Windows group policies, and you've got to turn off your multicast name resolution setting. And now what you're going to do is make these changes, rerun NodeZero, and verify that the problem has truly been remediated. And that's what's really important, is this find, fix, verify behavior. So what we see with our customers is, instead of running one manual pen test a year, with us, they're able to get a better, faster, more accurate, and complete pen test in a matter of a few hours. And the way that we license the product is it's an annual subscription. So you can run as many pen tests as you want, whenever you want. It's available 24/7. And so the behavior shift that we see with our customers is that they run NodeZero to find problems. They will then go off and fix the issues that have been identified, and then they'll rerun NodeZero to verify that the problems have truly been fixed. And it is this find, fix, verify behavior that gets the red team and the blue team to work together, creating the conditions for a purple team culture. Many of our customers now run 6 to 8 or more pen tests every single week in this find, fix, verify motion. And in fact, most of our customers are not security practitioners. They're network engineers that don't have a security team to fall back on, or the network engineers are the ones that have to fix the problems anyways. So they might as well use NodeZero to proactively find and fix those issues versus having to, in a panic, fix them because some threat has been identified within the company. So if we go back to the product, what I showed you were the impacts. Domain compromise, we found 4 domain users we could have gained access to. And what that means is, if we get domain user, we can now access all of the systems and resources of that domain user, which increases the risk of sensitive data theft, for instance. We're able to compromise 12 hosts. What that allows us to do is, or an attacker to do, is maintain persistence in your environment. And we were able to identify 6 different data stores we could have taken, as well as compromise multiple critical infrastructure networks. And what you'll see are the number of paths we were able to identify. 33 different ways we could have compromised those hosts. 18 different ways we could have gained access to that sensitive data. And this is why coverage matters, because what may have happened if you paid for a manual pen test is maybe a consultant would have found 1 path or 2 paths, but you need 100% coverage in order to find all 18 paths to make sure that you are truly cleaning up all of the threats in your environment versus just checking a security compliance checkbox. A few other features: all of the weaknesses we were able to identify that enable those attack paths will surface that. And we'll also tell you, based on the impact, what the real severity score of an issue should be. For instance, what might be a critical vulnerability for you or critical severity for you might be a low for somebody else, because you might have an unauthenticated access to the Jenkins script console, but if it didn't enable any critical business impact, it's not that serious an issue. So what we're able to do is understand the context. So in this case, it's already a 9.1, and because of the impact, the ability of us to harvest 4 additional credentials and access 53 data sources means that this needs to be elevated from a 9.1 to a 9.9. And for every one of these problems that is safe to exploit, and the way to know that is if there's a green checkbox, we deemed it was safe to exploit this problem in your environment, and there's going to be proof of exploitation. For example, we found this group policy problem, we found it on 2 machines, and here is proof of us successfully exploiting that. Now, what you're going to find is for net logon, there is no green checkbox here. It was not safe to exploit. It was really dangerous because if you exploit net logon, you could destabilize your networking components. And so as a result, we found it. We are very confident this is a problem, but we did not exploit it because it wasn't safe to exploit. And what we use is a series of reinforcement learning techniques and experience to know what is safe and what is unsafe to exploit within your environment. And once again, our goal is to make sure we don't make your day worse. All of the credentials we were able to harvest within your enterprise by role type. So we were able to find domain administrator. And by finding domain administrator, this is a big deal. Here is the full proof of us finding that domain admin credential and how we got there. Here's another example of a domain administrator. This one, as you can see, is incredibly complicated. What's really important to understand about the core technology is that these attack paths, this complex one you see right here, is not hard-coded anywhere in the product. Instead, what we use is this adaptive machine learning technique. And think of when IBM played Garry Kasparov in chess a bunch of years ago. IBM didn't hard code 40 million chess games and say, Gary must be playing game number 322. What IBM did was evaluate every piece on the board and identify the next best action in order to win. And that's how NodeZero operates. As it conducts reconnaissance, as it conducts its fingerprinting process, as it uncovers information through a misconfiguration or an exploitable vulnerability, all of that data is being added to the knowledge graph, and NodeZero is evaluating the next best action to execute. And so if your environment changes tomorrow, these attack paths will completely adapt and find new ways to successfully exploit your environment, just like an attacker would. And that's a really big difference compared to the legacy products in this space, where you would have had to write these attack paths yourself and maintain these attack paths. And if your environment changed, you'd have had to update your scripts to represent your new environment. And nobody has time to maintain these custom scripts. And so we wanted this entire system to be agentless, minimal configuration, and completely adaptive, so you can rerun pen tests in just a couple of clicks. Finally, all of the data we were able to gain access to and our initial understanding of risk to that data. So in this case, we were able to gain access to these folders on the SMB share drive. What sensitive files we're able to identify? We found CSV files, web configs, docs, MDB files, and so on. Now, we never actually, or NodeZero never actually looks at the contents of your files. We don't want that liability. We don't want that level of risk. So all we do is look at and characterize the risk based on file types and file names. And that way, we are good stewards of your information. Similarly, if we're able to crack a password, what you'll see is the password is masked out. That's how the password is stored in our systems and our reports. We never store this sensitive data in the reports in the clear. It's masked through the ETL process so that there is minimal sensitive information in these reports. So once again, we don't become a major threat vector for you because we don't want that liability and we don't want that responsibility. So that's how the product works. What you'll see are the summaries. We try to make it easy for you to understand at a simple snapshot what the problems are. If you still need to provide PDF reports to your leadership or to an external compliance entity, you can get the executive summary of your PDF report, just like you normally would from a pen test company. You're able to get a full detailed penetration report, just like you would from a manual consultant. Once again, these are third-party assessments, and so they meet that third-party assessment requirement. And if you want to do things like a PCI segmentation report, here is a PCI segmentation report you can take and use as part of that package. And as we continue to add to the product, a CIS controls report, you should expect a HIPAA report, you should expect, we'll continue to add more report types so that you can get over your reporting burdens in just a few clicks really quickly and more accurately. So let me leave you with this. The first is this cultural shift of find, fix, verify allows you to shift from waterfall security to agile security. You're able to find these problems as soon as they're introduced into the environment, and you can quickly remediate them. And that maximizes your security posture and it minimizes your effort. And you're also focusing on what can actually be exploited versus just some arbitrary vulnerability that isn't a true threat to the environment. So our thesis, help you find and fix what matters. Don't be the security guy that sticks their head in the sand. Sadly, we still run into people that don't want to know what threats are in their environment because they don't have the capacity to fix. And all we can say to those people is good luck. I look forward to talking to your replacement because you will get in the news, you will be hacked, and you will be fired, and we'll work with whoever replaces you. The way that we roll is it's all about letting our results do the talking. And there's no downside in running a NodeZero trial right now, once again, in a couple of clicks. Because if NodeZero finds something, you fix it, you verify it, and then you show your leadership how proactive you are. And if NodeZero finds nothing, you're able to prove to your leadership that your controls are actually working. And so the way that we operate is step one, this brief. We try to keep it to less than 30 minutes, and it's an overview of Horizon 3. The next step is to go off and just run a NodeZero op. You can schedule a demo or you can schedule a free trial. Go to Horizon3.ai and the links will be right there. Once you run that NodeZero op, step three is our customer success team will work with you and talk you through the findings so you understand what the real threats are to your environment. And now you've found your problems. And what customers will do as part of that process is go off and fix the issues that were identified and then rerun NodeZero to verify those problems have been done. And upon completing this find, fix, verify cycle, that's when we enter the commercial discussions for buying an annual subscription to NodeZero, whose pricing is based on the size of your attack surface, the size of your live IPs. And now you're able to continuously run these pen tests appropriately. I hope this was a good use of your time. Once again, you can go to Horizon3.ai. You can find our LinkedIn page. You can follow us on Twitter. You can schedule a demo. You can schedule a free trial. All of that is right off of the main website. And once again, thank you for your time. My name is Snehal Antani. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Horizon 3, and I look forward to working with you. Thanks.